Welcome back to another episode of Paper Movies Novelization Book Club, or as we like to call it, the Men with Beards podcast. Uh, I'm going to be your host for this one, Adam, and joining me there we go, in the middle. There is Jeremy, and to the far right there's other men with beard, or the Geeks Addict. Yet today we are going to be talking about the sequel to Spider-Man 2.
Oh, sorry.
The sequel to Spider-Man.
That
No,
Ghostbusters.
sequel to Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2. There we go. Yeah. Yep. We did this. We recorded Spider-Man last year with Matt and Chad, and that was a great discussion. It was a great book, in my opinion. But just like the first one, this book is by Peter David, and it was based on the screenplay by Alvin Sargent and David Koepp, Alfred Gough, and Miles Millar, and based on the Marvel comic by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. And Spider-Man 2 takes place 2 years after the events of the first film. Life is pretty rough for Peter Parker. He can't get to class on time. He keeps getting fired from his jobs. His family and friends' life is kind of being shattered, all while trying to maintain, his, mild-mannered life while trying to be a superhero at the same time. And, it starts to take a toll on him to the point to where he actually, they never really fully explain it in the film, has some type of psychological effect on him to where he can't actually use his powers. And this, and then at the same time, one of Peter's idols, Dr. Otto Octavius, gets into a freak accident and has 4 metallic limbs attached to him, and he becomes Doc Ock.
Yep. Jeremy,
Yep.
you want to go first, or?
Yeah.
Oh. I didn't finish this.
Guys, I gotta say, so I'll start it off with this. I did not like the first chapter of this book.
Oh, it's one of the worst first chapters I've ever read in a novel.
I thought it was it did not fit in with the rest of the novelization. Like, everything after the first chapter was fine. But the first one, it tried to be silly. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if it ties into something that happened in the comic books at some point in time, but
No,
with
it doesn't tie into anything. So the big thing is that there's a guy running around in a mech suit that kind of, what it reminded me of is Paul Giamatti Rhino from Amazing Spider-Man 2, his stupid mech suit at the end of that movie. It reminded me of that. Or like Stilt Man. Like they were trying to make Stilt Man or something stupid like that. And he tries to kidnap Otto Octavius, and Spider-Man stops him, throws him off a building.
And they also kind of wanted to establish that they wanted to, like, in the movie, they established that Dr. Connors and Dr. Octavius are friends, but that's in that novelization, that's like the only time that they ever actually interact as friends. And, we also learned that, like, oh yeah, I'm studying lizard DNA. Like, oh, we know where this is going if you read the Spider-Man comics. But yeah, they actually have those guys in the mech suits in the Spider-Man 2 PS2 game. And because I remember playing that game a lot, because it kind of introduced that free roam concept, where you can swing through the city
thing. Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. The first chapter, very out of place, because I think, I don't know, it didn't feel like it flowed very well with the rest of the book.
It didn't. I mean, didn't it even kind of set it up to where the people are going to be kind of turning against Spider-Man in a way? Because the dude falls off of a building, and everybody looks up and sees Spider-Man up there. Like, did he just drop that guy? Yeah, but then all that's just kind of forgotten, and everybody loves Spider-Man except
so that way we can have the Joey Diaz scene where he says, "Hey, you want to get to him? You got to go through us." Which is really funny because Joey Diaz. Joey Diaz is like the funniest person on earth.
Well, I'm just going to go off and say right off the bat, this I thought this was like a very easy read, and I'm going to be honest, I took a gamble with this, and I just told the guys this morning, but after reading the first 2 chapters, like, I started reading the first 2 chapters like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I immediately knew there's like I'm going to be able to finish this book in a day because it's an easy read, and very much it was. I finished it in like 3 hours this morning. And it's a good book. I really enjoyed it. I mean, not so much the first chapter like we just talked about, but there's a couple of things that was a little different that I was wanting to talk about, but I'll let you guys go into your thoughts first.
I mean, I thought that of course, I said the first chapter just dull. It was misleading, thinking that people are going to kind of turn against Spider-Man, and then you got Jack All, I guess was the guy. That's what I have in my notes. And Spider-Man's kind of making jokes about that. But there are a lot of differences from the film in this novelization, which I didn't mind at all. I do like that the author, Alvin, who is the author, Peter David, which we've read Peter David before. He did a really good job building up the characters, getting into thoughts, some backstory on some other characters, which was interesting too. And I think for the most part, I liked the book better than the film. I think of course, seeing the action on the screen is cool, but I don't know if I prefer the character stuff over the action, and getting more with what is this, Harry? I can't remember his last name right now. Osmond, yeah. Oscorp, yeah. Harry, getting it like more with Harry in the book, I felt was like more fascinating than seeing his portrayal on screen. Maybe that has something to do with the actor too. Just kind of seemed off, but he seemed more angry and just upset in the story, in the book, and it felt more genuine.
I remember there were some scenes between Peter and Harry Osborn that was in the director's cut.
Yeah, in 2.1.
Spider-Man 2.5. Yeah. And so I remember seeing those scenes in the book, but there was like, I noticed this book was kind of doing like a mix of both cuts of the film. Like there'd be stuff that was in the director's cut in this book, but then there would be stuff that wasn't in the director's cut that was in this book. And that was in the director's that it didn't feature. And like there's one like where after J. Jonah Jameson acquires the Spider-Man suit, he like puts it on and starts, jumping around his office, like pretending to spin webs and everything, which is actually in the director's cut. And you see J.K. Simmons, just jumping around in a Spider-Man suit. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would go as far as to say I like this book better than the film. The film's, for me is nostalgic, but I did really enjoy this book and definitely recommend that you read it. The one thing that I noticed that I wasn't a big fan of was that in the movie, they put more focus on the fact that Peter's losing his powers. In the novel, it just kind of felt like it just happened. It was just like, huh, that's weird. And like
a glitch of some sort.
Yeah, but it was like, but they were kind of portraying it in the film like he was actually losing his powers. And they never really fully explain it, except for in the movie Spider-Man.
He talks to the ghost of Uncle Ben. Says he doesn't want to be Spider-Man anymore.
Yeah.
Which is kind of goofy and weird, but I think that's from the comic. Which
he talks to
Uncle Ben's ghost quite every once in a while in the comics. That's how they get around that Uncle Ben's dead. They haven't come out with Spider Uncle Ben yet. Like Spider Gwen. They haven't
Spider Ben.
Yes. Well, because you have Scarlet Spider, who's Ben. I can't remember.
Ben Reilly.
Ben Reilly from the Clone Saga, who's Peter Parker, but not Peter Parker. Because they didn't want to commit to that one because the Clone Saga was awful.
I did like that I did like that they were adding more to like you see that scene where like you spend more time with Mary Jane and John Jameson, J. Jonah Jameson's son, the astronaut. There's like in the movie, they're probably like in maybe 2 or 3 scenes together, but in this one, they actually have like more conversations. There's a scene where John's introducing him to J. Jonah Jameson, and he's of course with his antics and everything, and at the end he's just like, I like this girl, you should marry her. And but then like by the end of it, spoiler alert, whenever she decides not to marry his son, he's like, I never liked that girl, just like, I'm gonna ruin her life. And which, by the way, there was something that happened in that scene that I caught on to that I was like, man, that's like that was messed up, but I'll get into that in just a minute. But yeah, I thought the book was very well told. I don't know if I would say that I liked it as much as the first one. I thought it was good. They toned down quite a bit on the other superhero references, if you guys noticed that.
Wasn't there mention of the Hulk in the last one?
They mentioned the Hulk, the Fantastic Four, Daredevil, and I believe that's it. But in this one, they only mentioned Doctor Strange, the Hulk, and Ant-Man.
Didn't they say Doctor Strange and Jameson was like, nope, that's taken or something like that?
Yeah.
Hank Pym, Henry Pym, they mentioned. I thought that was kind of cool. He's a giant in a field where the others are ants. That's what it said.
Yeah.
I had that written.
Well, they even kind of imply that he used his technology, like in that scene where Octavius's machine is going haywire, and then Spider-Man sees him come by and tries to help Octavius, and he's just like, where did this guy come from? I could have sworn he was standing right here, but he just seems like he disappeared. So kind of imply that he shrunk or something.
Yeah, that was cool. I remember that. And that, speaking on like Octavius's little change, I remember seeing this film in theater and hadn't watched it since until like right before I read this book. It was on Netflix, and then they took it away. But the tentacles, like the AI that attached to his spine and went into his brain and everything, I didn't get that when I first saw the film for some reason. I was like, that's dumb. But this time, it's kind of relevant, the AI stuff. And you got people looking into putting chips in people's brains and stuff, and like the communication between that AI and Octavius in this book, I thought was way better than in the film, because we get to see the conversation take place with his thoughts and how they like refer to him as like father.
I honestly didn't care for that much. I thought it was kind of cheesy.
It is cheesy.
I get why they wouldn't do it, because we had the weird stuff with Green Goblin talking to Norman Osborn in the first movie, and I think critics made fun of that because it's so hilarious. The heart, we take his heart, because that's dumb. That's goofy and weird. So I get why they didn't want to do that with the arms.
But they had it hissing, which I thought was dumb from the film.
Yeah, that's stupid enough. But I mean, I think
it's a robot.
A little.
Yeah.
Better. I don't know.
It would have been better, honestly, if there was like maybe static noises, like internal static noises, and maybe the arm's not like looking at him and talking to him like puppets or something like that.
It's like, what are we doing here?
Well, let me just put it this way for the initial Raimi trilogy. The hissing arms are nowhere near as bad as what Venom praying to God to kill Peter Parker. Eddie Brock. Topher Grace, dear God, please help me kill Peter Parker. That's the cringiest thing in this whole series. Then you got next to that, you got the Harry Osborn having conversations with his father in Spider-Man 3. That's stupid. Then you have Norman Osborn talking to the Green Goblin, and then you got the shrieking, the hissing
arms,
dog claws. At least Sandman was normal.
Yeah, I remember they kind of made fun of that in the. There's a YouTube channel called How It Should Have Ended, where they do like these films animated, and it shows like all the flaws and everything, and it shows like in Spider-Man 3 where it shows like, hey, it's me, Peter Parker, your friendly neighbor, and then it shows this kid like, Spider-Man, please stop narrating. Like, it's kind of unnecessary. If we're watching this film, chances are we've seen the first two, so we know what's going on.
It's funny.
Here's my big problem with this book. It felt phoned in to me. Spider-Man 1 was a lot better than it should have been. I think we can all agree on that.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I really loved was the bookends of him talking to Uncle Ben's grave. I wish that would have been the case in this, because that's a good way of opening a book. Is that whole thing of scaring the kids away from vandalizing the grave and stuff, and he tells his story, and then Spider-Man 2 we open with not Stilt Man just kidnapping Doc Ock, and it sounds like it'd be a fun thing. It's not. It's kind of dumb. And then the rest of the book happens, and like I just checked out personally. I just couldn't get into this at all.
I kind of like going back to what you were talking about earlier, Adam, about the losing the powers thing. It's still really not, to me, that clear in the novel either. It's like an internal struggle that he's having. It's like, which doesn't make sense, because if it was caused by a radioactive spider that bites him, how would his will, his drive, affect what happened to him, biologically? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they from what it sounded like, it was like, I mean the spider's venom redesigned his DNA. So I mean, and so there shouldn't be any physical reason why he wasn't being able to access his powers. But in the movie Spider-Man No Way Home, he implies that it was kind of some type of existential crisis that he was going through, where he just didn't want to use his powers. So like mind over muscle type thing, from what I gathered of it. I mean, in the comics, Spider-Man's powers do glitch and he loses them from time to time, but it's not because he's losing his powers. It's that his powers are mutating him to at least that was explained in the Spider-Man animated series, where his powers would glitch, but it was because his DNA was like mutating him, and he turns him into a giant man spider.
I mean, in JMS's run, he has to double dose himself with the spider venom again in order to fight Morlun. He wasn't powerful, and then that causes issues. This does happen. I wonder if the idea from the authors was to have like a Madam Web connection to that. Matthew has no idea what we're talking about.
Madam Web is a mystical character. She's blind, but she's she's got psychic.
She can see through the webs of time and other dimensions and stuff. And she's like a spider being. There's a whole cosmic thing with the Spider-Verse, where there are beings. One of them's named Morlun. He has a family, and they eat spider-powered beings. They hunt and eat their essence. That's what the whole Spider-Verse thing, event was about, was getting all the Spider men and women and Spider-Pig together to fight these people. That's getting into the weeds of Spider-Man mythos right there.
Wow.
I remember thinking that in the theater when I was a kid. I'm like, oh, is Madam Web going to show up? Because she was a prominent character in the Spider-Man animated series. That's where they really started to explain what her actual purpose was. Because in the comics, she just showed up occasionally.
There's a scene from the movie that I loved, and that was when Doc Ock wakes up in the hospital. And it took me right, the thing that I thought of immediately when he woke up and the arms started shooting all around the place was The Evil Dead.
Yeah,
I knew it.
It's a reference to Evil Dead too.
Yeah, it was perfect.
Oh, I was
even though it's feels completely different than everything else that was shot in that film, but it was he was waiting for that. Like, oh, I'm going to do a little reference. We'll see if anybody notices the style of cinematography. And it was like, oh, this is Evil Dead.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and they also have Ash, who plays the usher in the movie. What's his name again?
Bruce Campbell.
Bruce Campbell. But they actually there was actually a backstory behind that usher. He was actually supposed to be Mysterio. Like there was this whole thing in like a concept of Spider-Man 4 where I think like when he there was like a concept art of like Spider-Man arresting all these villains, and one of them is Mysterio, and his helmet falls off, and it's revealed to be Bruce Campbell as Quentin Beck.
Yeah.
And like but yeah, I knew like once I remember that we were doing this, like, oh, he's gonna make that Evil Dead connection. I was like, yep, there it is.
Yeah,
no,
I mean, that gave me nightmares as a child.
I mean, like, if you watch the film, like that last person that they kill, like he straight up like that tentacle like straight up decapitates that doctor, because like if you'll see like a head rolling away.
It's pretty graphic.
Like, yeah.
It also references the scene where Liam Neeson becomes Darkman in the Darkman movie, also a Sam Raimi movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
where does it reference that?
When like that whole scene with Doc Ock, it looks the same as when he like Darkman gets like blown up and thrown from the building, and like that whole scene where he gets the crap beaten out of him.
I haven't seen that film.
Okay.
I can just imagine the quick zoom ins and everything, and fast.
I would recommend you check out Darkman. It's actually it's worth a watch.
It's good, but it's bizarre. It's a bizarre movie.
You can hear Liam Neeson try to do a scary Batman growl-like voice.
Oh, nice. Did you guys understand the argument, like, or the relationship between Ben's ghost and Peter Parker? Because I was kind of having a little bit of trouble following that whole situation, because I couldn't tell if Ben is like, you have to be Spider-Man because you're the reason I'm dead.
It's Peter. The thing about Spider-Man is that he carries, even in the comics, he carries a lot of guilt, and he has like a lot of anxiety. He puts way too much thought into things, and that's kind of how I viewed it. Is that it wasn't actually like a guilt trip from like a ghost of Ben Parker. It was just Peter, struggling. Like he always takes the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he always like views each failure as like, I failed Uncle Ben, like I failed, it's my responsibility to save these people, and it's like, and like he doesn't, like, if he fails, like he doesn't just sometimes just move on. There's times where he's like, it haunts him.
I mean, Spider-Man, Peter Parker has taken this whole thing to the point where he sacrificed his marriage to Marvel's equivalent of the devil to save Aunt May.
There was this whole story where... Go ahead.
Well, the whole point was they thought that young readers wouldn't care for a Peter Parker that's married, and they wanted to reboot that he's just a single guy in his 20s again. So what they did was, after Civil War, there's an arc called Back in Black, and in it, Aunt May's mortally wounded. And Peter Parker, in an attempt to save Aunt May, because he can't lose Aunt May. He's already lost Uncle Ben. He can't lose Aunt May. He sacrifices his marriage to Mary Jane to, what was it? Mephisto is the character's name, right?
Mephisto, yeah. The same guy that gave Ghost Rider his abilities.
Yeah.
Wow.
The fans hated it.
Yeah, they still do. Yeah, that's
because then that led to Dan Slott and the Dan Slott regime, which is just the worst thing that has ever happened to Spider-Man.
I used to have that issue though, Back in Black. It was actually not bad. One more day.
Yeah, Back in Black, the story is good. It's quite good. It's the greatest follow-up to. It's the only logical follow-up to Civil War, at least for the Spider-Man character, because he gets effed over in Civil War by Iron Man. I wish we got a Civil War novelization, like the Captain America movie.
Oh, you mean the movie? And I was like, there's a Civil War novelization of the comic right there.
Yeah. You know, the villain in this book, bringing it back to Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Was I liked how he like still had his like he still had a moral ground within, like buried underneath the AI, but like he was controlled and manipulated by the AI that had taken over his brain.
Which is weird if you're a comic book fan of Doc Ock, because that's not really how he works. He's a narcissistic genius.
Okay, so he's just in the comics, like in the origins, he's actually just evil pretty much.
He's crazy.
Oh, he's crazy and evil. And at one point he took over Spider-Man's body, but we won't get into that.
All right. But I found it I liked this villain better than what we got in the first movie.
Yeah. Well, I get why they did it that way, but to choose Doc Ock for that it's kind of peculiar. I go back and forth on this because I do like the Doc Ock in the Spider-Man 2 and in No Way Home, which is the follow-up to that. Because it's just a different take on the character. But I'm trying to think, like, what if we had Lizard in here, someone more sympathetic, like in the comics, like the Lizard can be sympathetic when he's not turning his family into lizards and eating people. Something like that's something with Amazing Spider-Man did the reverse of that, where they took Dr. Connors and they made him unsympathetic and more of a maniac that turns into a lizard.
Yeah, like he starts to want to. I mean, it's kind of a similar concept, but in a way, kind of reverse. Like Doc Ock wants to build his science project to kind of because it's his dream. He wants to, for the betterment of mankind. The Lizard in that one, he wanted to, again in his own way, try to what he thought was benefiting mankind was like turning them into giant reptiles that looked like Goombas from the 90s Mario film.
Thank you. I'm glad I'm not the only one who thought that. But I'm just I get why they chose Doc Ock for Spider-Man 2. Because let's say Green Goblin is Spider-Man's nemesis. We can agree on that. Like he threw Gwen Stacy off a bridge, you know. He killed the love of his life. And who's the next most recognizable? Well, it's the person who the first supervillain to show up in the Spider-Man cartoon from Hanna-Barbera. It's Doc Ock. Like you're not going to put for your sequel going to put Mysterio in. You're not going to put Kraven the Hunter or Lizard or Scorpion or Shocker. You're not going to put any of those in because most people won't know who those are, but they know who Doc Ock is.
Yeah,
and it's just weird, but they didn't want to commit to having another megalomaniac, so they changed his character. And I get that this is like a point of tension between the fans of this movie, because it's not Doc Ock as comic book Doc Ock. It's a different character, and I don't know how I feel about that because I go back and forth on that.
I do like that they make it more personal to Peter. Like in the first one, you know, it was his friend's dad, but in this one, it's actually an idol, like a mentor.
Yeah.
And they touch on that more in the Spider-Man PS4 game.
Yeah.
But I do like that they have that, you know, student mentor type thing. But, you know, and there was like, and they actually in this book, which kind of got a little dark from a Peter Parker actually contemplated, killing Doc Ock.
Mm-hmm.
Like whenever he threatened, like he said, when he threatens to peel the flesh off MJ's bones if he can't find Spider-Man, he's just like, I could end it all right here, right now, and he pulls back his fist and everything, and that, I mean, I don't know, I like that. I mean, it just shows that even though Spider-Man's a hero, like he does have his dark moments, where he could cross that line,
The temptation.
and yeah, and just the punch from Peter Parker, like, would have probably killed Doc Ock, because like even though Doc Ock has those tentacles, he's not as strong as Spider-Man. Like Spider-Man can lift like a semi truck with his bare hands. So
yeah. So my thoughts too, like my question, like in both the film and in the movie, the film and the novelization, is with Harry. Is what is the deal with him hearing his father's voice and then discovering the secret room with the outfit? Like, who put the outfit in this secret room? Did Spider-Man creep back into the house and like put his mask back in there, or is this extra?
It's a different suit.
It's an extra suit.
Yeah,
that's how I've always interpreted that. When Norman would have his blackouts in the first movie, and Goblin would take over, Goblin did that. Goblin set all that stuff up.
So did he drug his son, like Harry, with this thing to where he's like hearing voices, or is he just a drunk that's like a magic? Because every scene he's got a drink in his hand.
Well, because
I take it
Spider-Man 3, he has this too, where he has a straight up conversation with the ghost of Norman Osborn. Like,
I took it in the second film as more like an internal struggle. Like he was hearing his father's voice in his head and like kind of just visualizing him, and he was just kind of conflicted, and it was just kind of like a coincidence that he just threw the knife at that mirror. But in the third film, I could believe that it was like he was actually conversing with his father, because he was at that point he was doused with that same gas that turned him into the Green Goblin.
That happens in
that was my take on it.
One.
Do what?
That happens in the beginning of the third one. Although he doesn't wear the suit, he wears that really, really dumb glasses suit.
What's funny is like I've never experienced Spider-Man 3, so I just know that whenever you pick number 3, that's going to be my first exposure to it.
Oh. Well, so. Spider-Man 3, I can tell you now because Noah told me this. Spider-Man 3's novelization has a continuity error with the novelization to Spider-Man 1 because they reintroduced Eddie Brock to Peter Parker.
Mm-hmm.
And it's written by Peter David. And it's like, did you phone that in? Like,
sometimes you just forget.
I don't know. What I wish this novelization had is more nods to the first novelization. Like, sort of keep more of the threads of that going. It just feels like Peter David was contracted to do all these Marvel novelizations that didn't have X-Men in the title. Because Chris Claremont wanted to write the most wordy books ever written.
I remembered something that kind of bothered me a little bit. I was like, oh, how convenient. It talks about how Peter Parker had ordered 2 Spider-Man suits. So that way we know that he's got a suit that's all put together nicely. Because in the first movie it ended is all, destroyed. It's like,
I did like that there was that scene with the elevator where his powers glitch, and he's just like, I can't, like, because in the novelization, the first one, it talks about how the wrestlers like Taylor made that suit for him. And then he's just like, oh, well, I can't tell him that. He could trace it back to me and find out who I am and everything. And so he just said, I made it. It was just a simple lie. And I'm like, I like that. I liked how they were kind of going with that continuity.
Cover up type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just want to bring something up that
Go ahead.
I have. Just a weird thing I noticed with all these Spider-Man like movie suits. So Spider-Man in the comics, he's always having to patch his own suits. But he has these like Hollywood beautiful ass suits. It's like, how did Peter Parker afford these? Like, how does he afford to keep up with this and make it look seamless? He's not a seamstress. Like I was just reading Spider-Man issue 135, which is actually kind of tied into part of the storyline with this, which is Harry Osborn doesn't want to talk to Peter because he knows that Peter's Spider-Man and Spider-Man killed his father. It's that right in that era when in the 70s before Harry became Green Goblin. It's interesting, and but in this little panel, Peter Parker's having to stitch up his Spider-Man suit because it's ripped, and he keeps poking his fingers with the needle, and I'm just like, part of me wishes that in one of these Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies we had like a patchy suit where it's like it's got some flaws in it.
Like the whole movie, he's in like the hoodie with the like goggles.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
Or everybody's like, Jeremy would probably remember this, like when he loses one of his suits, so he has to borrow a Fantastic Four suit, but he doesn't have a mask, so he puts a bag on his head.
Yeah, my personal favorite though is he loses his suit and he's in his underwear. That was in the Dan Slott run, and he had to make a web suit, like out of web. It was him and Silk. Mm-hmm. It was when Silk was introduced, and she made a web suit, and he made one, but it's kind of like a loincloth.
That would be funny. That would have been a funny gimmick if they did that in the new one. Like if Peter Parker, he loses his suit, something happens, he goes into like a Spirit Halloween store and he gets like the Green Man suit. It's just like all green.
Well, there's been some times where, like in the comics, he's had to rush so quickly to a crime scene that he didn't have time to change, so he just puts his mask on.
Yeah.
And but that's kind of like what you were talking about, Jeremy. Like that's why, like the Amazing Spider-Man suit, the one that's like kind of, weird looking. Yeah. That's always my favorite, just because I feel like that's the most accurate portrayal of like how a high school student would,
and then they show him making it.
Yeah,
that's always my favorite scenes from that.
Because like I think he's the only one that actually made his own suit until like we get to No Way Home. But there was one scene where I like the struggle between like with Mary Jane. Like she's her friend Louisa is like constantly like saying like, do you like are you sure you should be marrying John? Just like, you don't seem like you love him. Like don't marry him just to prove something to your dad. And then right at the end, like her dad actually has a redeeming quality, and he's actually saying like, well, do you love this again, or do you love Peter Parker? Like, well, don't be here, and just go marry Peter Parker then. And then immediately after that, her friend looks at John after he announces that the wedding's off. He goes like, so what are you doing later? I'm like, oh,
I like how, yeah, because he's like, seems like he wasn't even into it, like getting married, because he's like, it happens. And his dad, he's like, I'm pissed off. I want to ruin her. That's kind of funny.
Well, it's nice to see that J. Jonah Jameson isn't thinking of himself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I do like, they had like one more Jonah quirk, and I thought it was funny, and I actually told my wife about it. It was just like he fires Peter Parker and he fires Peter Parker, and then Peter's like, you can't fire me, I'm a freelancer. He's like, oh right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and offer you a job. You want to be on our staff? He's like, yeah, you're fired.
Yeah. Oh, there's that one scene too that in the book that I don't think it was in the film, when the that bum comes in off the street with the Spider-Man suit, and
it was played differently.
Yeah, and he's getting the paycheck, and he's like, what is he like? Give him $10 or $100 or whatever, 40 something, and then like the lady is filling out the little sheet of paper for him to go to Treasury to trade for the money. She adds a couple zeros, and the bum's like, I think you put too many zeros by mistake. She's like, no, I don't make mistakes. So she like ignored what Jameson said and gave the guy a lot more money. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought it was nice, but I remembered at the beginning of that scene where she's just like, the security guard was just like, "Do you want me to escort him in with you?" She goes, "No." Then looks at him like, "Yes." I'm like, "Oh," but then probably felt bad about it. Just like, I was like, "Yeah, I'll give him more money."
Yeah.
There was something else that that whole scene with when Peter finally confesses that he was responsible for Uncle Ben's death. Um, that was actually a little bit more tense in the book. Like, she outright like shouts at him and tells him to get out
Yeah.
and go away. He's like, "I can't be around you." But then like the next thing she's like, "Oh, water under the bridge," you know. But
yeah, that's awkward in the film.
yeah, she just stares at him and just walks away.
Like that whole like it's just weird. The forgiveness thing, it's never quite worked for me. It's just like it's acted fine, but it's not just not written well.
Yeah.
It's like we have to Aunt May has to be the voice of reason, so and to be like the like unofficial guide for him. So, but we just wrote like ruined that, and it's like, oh well, she's okay with it now, and like it's just not explained well. I just don't. That's not Peter David's fault. I think that's just the
Script.
There was, you mentioned this earlier, Jeremy, the guy on the subway. I liked it was both scenes I thought were fine, like how they played out, like in the movie, where people discover that Spider-Man's really a teenager, like in the subway. Like, I remember in the movie, his mask, like there's an explosion and his mask kind of sparks and he takes it off.
Yeah.
But in the book, like, someone actually pulls the mask off of him and was just like, "Hey, who's got a camera? We could be famous for this." And everybody's just like staring at him, just like, like giving him that threatening look, just like, "Give me the mask back." I mean, I liked, I don't know which version I would probably prefer, but I did like that in both versions. Like, they were kind of like, they got his back,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's to show that the New York protects their own, that sort of thing. You know who hates that scene is Matt Wilkins. He once went on a rant about that scene to me because he thinks it's just the dumbest thing.
Was Spider-Man being his identity exposed? Or?
Yeah, and that no one says anything.
Yeah, like, we won't. Yeah, like I remember in the movie, like the kid's like, "We won't tell anybody." It's just like, "Well, there's really nothing you can tell. You didn't take my picture."
He had brown hair.
It's just, and also, like, you don't know my name, so it's not like you can just.
Yeah.
And I just love Joey Diaz, famous comedian. Hey, you want him? You gotta go through us.
And Doc Ock's like,
Okay.
"Okay."
Rips it open.
Yeah, like I said, didn't think it was as good as the first book. It was still good. It's for my grading, I'd give it like an A minor. I didn't care for the first chapter as with you guys, and I didn't like the whole internal, like the arms like looking at Doc and like going, "Father, we'll help you, Father." Like, I just didn't go for that, But I get what they were wanting to kind of give, like, the audience like an idea like what those arms were saying to him if you only watch the movie, but I don't know, it just didn't work for me.
Jeremy, what do you think?
2.5 out of 5.
Okay, I'm gonna give it a B+. I liked it better than the film, I think.
It's just not.
I don't know. I keep going back and forth.
That ultimately, when it comes to like grading these, it comes down to personal preference for us, right?
Yeah,
we just all like certain things, and for me, a book like this, it has to be really, really good. Like, it has to be above and beyond what we normally read, and that, to me, it's just not my thing. Is what I'm getting at, and I'm trying not to be biased. about that. But I like this more than Jaws: The Revenge. How about that? I like this more than The Predator.
Yeah, definitely.
I think you finished more of this than you did Jaws: The Revenge.
We've read some of the worst things ever written on this podcast. This is not one of the worst things ever written. I just don't care for it. It's just not for me.
I'm not a huge comic book like film fan. I mean, I've enjoyed the films that I've seen, but they're not like my I'm going to go watch them again and revisit them all often. So, I mean, like revisiting it was nice. I'm glad that I did revisit this because, like I said, the last time I saw it was in theaters. So,
ultimately, like I think of this, like I would rather be reading the first novelization of the first movie than this, and I'd rather be reading the Tim Burton Batman novelization. Like I just preferred those more. Just personal preference. It's not that this is bad necessarily. Like it's just not for me. Although that first chapter I think is terrible. I think it
totally didn't fit. Didn't fit.
My recommendation: start with the second chapter. Go forward.
There you go. If you're gonna read the book, start on chapter 2.
Yeah.
Or if you just want to see the weirdness, then you can.
Or skim it. Skim the first chapter and then actually start reading from chapter 2.
Yeah.
Actually, if you skip chapter 1, that would actually, I think, flow better because it would talk about like Mary Jane meeting Jameson, and then I think it ends with just like, oh yeah, I know, friend of mine, Peter Parker, like he loves his job. But then chapter 3, Spider-Man hated his job, and I'm like,
there.
I think that would kind of flow better.
There we go.
But yeah, like I said, it was good, and you know me, I love comic book films, and so. But probably later I might try to get out of my comfort zone and pick something like, non-comic booky or Godzilla. But no, yeah, it was. I definitely recommend watching the movie first.
Yeah,
and then checking out the novel just to get like the different spices on it and everything. But
that's the way I usually approach each novelization before we get into the books. I'm like, I want to see this film first and then read the book because it's I don't know, it sticks in my head when I see it on film, and then when I'm reading, I'm like, oh, that's new, or that don't remember that. Where'd that scene go? It's just for me, it's easier to visualize and to pick out the differences.
For me, it's the reverse. I have to read it first, and then when I watch the movie, it cements things in my mind and cements the differences. That way I don't have to take notes.
I'm kind of intrigued to see how this is going to play out when we read Batman Forever, because I have a feeling what we're going to read is going to be completely different than what we see Jim Carrey doing on screen.
I think so too.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a trip.
Yeah.
I wonder if it will be more reserved.
Probably.
It could be. I mean, because the comic book version of the Riddler is not that, how should I put this?
A cartoon?
Jim Carrey.
He's not the Mask.
Yeah, Dumb and Dumber movie.
He's not Lloyd Christmas.
It's like with Batman Forever, that movie. It's like we got, instead of the Riddler, we get the Mask, and instead of Two-Face, we get the Joker.
Yeah.
But not like the normal Joker. We get Cesar Romero Joker from the Adam West show.
Yeah.
That's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
But okay, with that said, guys, I think that's gonna do it for this month's episode of Paper Movies. So yeah, definitely, if you want to check out Spider-Man 2, and also stay tuned for next month. We're going to be joined by Noah from Quality Autism as we discuss the novelization to the second Brosnan film, Tomorrow Never Dies. So, guys, thank you again so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Stay Gucci.